See,
Never was the issue when I was the chairperson.
Let's keep that in mind.
calling the meeting to order.
All right, board docs.
First item on the agenda, approval of last month's minutes.
I move that we approve the minutes.
Second.
We have all
Where are the
all in
binders?
favor. All right. Aye.
Okay.
Do you want?
Next
we need
item.
I'll get it. Yep.
Oh, I know. I can go get them.
I'll go get them.
I just
Next item
I
on
said,
agenda.
where
You
are
want
the
the
binders?
binders? Okay,
Yeah.
we can.
She's gonna go get the binders.
We'll start talking about them
Yep.
while Kim goes to get the binders. There was a couple emails, and I don't think it was anything related to the 100s.
I saw that. Where is that?
There was a portion for the 200. So at the board meeting, there was conversation about adding the statement code of ethics back in, or taking it out, or changing the language. So I wanted us to discuss that here at the meeting to see if anyone had,
And you're in the 200s.
what's that?
The 200s?
Yep.
Yes.
Yeah, there's a couple in the 200s that I have votes on.
Okay. We'll start there.
Yeah, so one of them was, like you said, the 204 Code of Ethics.
Mm-hmm.
So we did pull the scratching of the 204. So right now, if you look in the attachment, it will show as live instead of all redlined out.
So the recollection I have of this conversation was, it should be there, but we need to ensure the constitutionality of it all.
Yeah.
And I'm at the point where I don't know that that's my role is to determine the constitutionality of things.
Well-
we're getting language from
Right.
We're getting from
other places
IASB.
that have vetted it to some extent. I know there was some comment, I think even on IASB's like little notes on specifically the one that's always the one in question about, you know, what's best practice when it comes to like what you say about people and stuff. But
Yeah, I think if we just took out the very last bullet point,
That should maybe suffice. I think that's where people were getting concerns with, that last bullet point.
Right, and that's the disparaging remarks one.
mhm.
yeah.
Mm-hmm. I didn't hear any concerns about the rest of them. I thought that's where most of the comments, both written and at the board meeting.
Mm-hmm.
204, the last
Okay.
bullet.
It seemed to me most of the board members wanted to leave it in as a thing.
Yeah.
So I think we should leave it in there, but I agree that that last bullet point was the only one that anybody really had a problem with. So.
Okay. So we'll leave it in and strike that line out.
And I don't know if you want to add, because Lori didn't want to write to everybody because she didn't want to write to a quorum. So,
Review dates.
yeah, well, I was thinking that she said, and I'm trying to find it here. She said, I can go either way. My first inclination would be not to include any policy that cannot be enforced when violated, and these cannot. That said, it's a code of ethics to aspire to. So that, she looked at it from an aspirational standpoint.
Well, I think it's the same thing that I said the other meeting. just now.
Right.
Yeah.
Just like our board norms, there's no
Right.
way for us to enforce those. I
Mhm.
think people know those are things we hope people will work towards and aspire and actually be an example of.
Yeah.
I don't know what more we can add for that to be communicated.
Yep. And then she also noted with the objections in the community regarding constitutionality, you might want to consider that. So one of the things that we didn't do, but we could certainly do, is we could reach out to IASB formally and just ask for their affirmation that their legal counsel who drafts the policies have considered constitutional concerns and whether or not those have been addressed. I think we could get an affirmative answer from them pretty quickly.
Yeah, most of them are you know, behavior, right? Well, I shouldn't say that. Kind of the last chunk of the ones on the second page for sure. I mean, you have something like board members recognize the integrity of the predecessors, you know, like, yeah. That doesn't mean you then have to always do what they have done,
No,
right?
right.
So it's a statement that
I think you're
is
anticipating
sort
the
of,
Yeah.
best intent of those that came before you. It's kind of like that second to the last one, honest and thoughtful opinions in board meetings, focused on kids.
Mm-hmm.
And I understand your point. You know, one of the issues that has come up in the past is that there aren't any enforceable repercussions for board members for behavior. So there's no recall in the state, there's no censure rules in the state, so the most that a board as a body can do, and it's not just you as a board, but most that any elected body can do is to call to task a member of their group. There's no actual
Right.
penalties or anything else that can be enforced as part of that process. So,
is the, I don't know, 200, 204, whatever the number is. I mean, is it just called Code of Ethics and whatever we got? Because a lot of this stuff is not ethics in the end, right? I mean, some of them are, I guess, but
no,
Yeah.
the one down there about like committing to learning, I think that's the third one up from the bottom. Endeavor to keep informed on local, state, and national educational developments of significance. I think you folks talked about it at one of your earlier meetings. These are more aligned to our norms. I think that's just the title that they have for it is Code of Ethics.
Yeah. I think it's just a title.
again, and I don't know if that's where some of the sticking point is. Like, I'm wondering if in the header itself, instead of changing all of the individual bullet points, I mean, it has, in accordance with this belief and adoption of this policy, each board member commits to the following of the code of ethics. I mean, that statement is sort of like this is our goal. Or,
Like I said, it's not unlike the norms process that you went through at the retreat to come up with the, you know, in these we believe kind of thing.
so I don't know, I guess that statement in and of itself kind of gives you that room to say that it's aspirational more than it's law, right?
Right.
We're just kind of committed to following these guidelines.
Yeah.
I don't know. Probably overthinking it too much.
Okay.
Let the record indicate nodding heads.
No. All
Fair
right. So we're gonna take out the last line in the Code of Ethics.
I think that's what I would go back to the rest of
Okay.
the board with.
All
All
right.
right.
Okay.
Yeah. Go ahead.
Can-
I'm sorry.
Well, one that was brought up at the board table was 216.1, which was the association membership.
Yep.
I wrote that one down more so because I have
Okay.
more of a wording on it, like anything
Mhm.
else, but I don't know what your point was.
It
We-
does strike out in the Iowa Association of School Boards. I don't know if you saw that.
I do now.
So I think that was the issue, that it specified,
My question would be, if we're using their policies now with their updates, where they come in and change them, it might be helpful to be a member of that.
She tracks those, so she knows that. So if they update it, we'll be able to redact that in a future update.
but we're not saying we're not going to be a member of this. We're just not calling out what that membership is.
Right. So when we did that, when we redlined that, we looked at the sentence to read, the board will maintain an active membership in organizations the board determines will be of benefit to the board and the school district. So IASB, UEN.
Yep.
If there are others like that, we look at and say, hey, we ought to be a member of that. then we thought that gave us the latitude
Mhm.
for the board to determine which memberships they thought were appropriate.
This is the
So it just.
the one time I'm gonna like be the wordsmith on it.
Yeah.
Because I am not that kind of guy, but I think just striking that we need to change the tense on either active membership or organizations because one's singular and one's plural, and it bothers me when I read it.
Okay.
So we should
yes.
maintain active memberships and
Memberships.
organizations, or
Yes.
maintain an active membership in
No.
an organization.
You were right.
Board will
Maintain
just bothers me.
active memberships.
Yep,
Mr.
in organizations the board
Wordsmith.
determines will be a benefit to the board and the school district. Very good, thank you.
It's the only one I have. The only one
Heads
so
rolling.
far.
Heads nodding around.
Yeah. Okay. Paul, did you have more?
203 was also brought up.
Yes.
So of interest, I'll just share this thinking with you as you go through it, because I think one of the things that was brought up in the conflict of interest, which I know has been discussed before and hasn't made its way into our conversation here, is should there be a disclosure form that board members sign, and then in the parallel one that's in the HR series, should there be one that employees sign? And so I know that we've talked about that before. I know you and Janet both looked up several, Paul and Janet both looked up several examples of forms that were out there, maybe about, what was that, about a month ago? We looked up several different forms that were out there that could be used from a sign-off standpoint. So I know that issue was raised also in a couple director emails over the weekend. Actually, in retrospect, I would think that that would be both, number one, a relatively easy solution to make, and also one that I'm surprised they don't have a form for it, to be
Yeah.
honest with you, in looking back at it. I know every other board that I sit on, the ICAD board, the Junior Achievement Board, our foundation board, I sign a conflict of interest disclosure annually, which is part of their process.
So that will be embedded right after this?
It would be 203 G1, 1G, G1, 203 G1.
And we would sign it annually?
Mhm. It's a best practice if you look at board governance, and I think so many nonprofit boards do it because they spend so much time fundraising
Mm-hmm.
that they want to make sure that those are clear, but I think it easily holds true for us too.
Yeah, and if we're gonna stick on the 200, I have no problem having one in there. I get a little worried when you start to say, "Oh, we just translate that to all employees," because I'm kind of like, "What's the conflict of teaching kids?"
Yeah.
Right. It's a whole different thing. Like
Yeah.
positions that are in the area to make decisions and purchasing and things like that. Like that's where you have that kind of stuff. But to say blanket statement, all employees have to sign one is.
I would think you would actually
Seems
look
a bit
at
much to me.
either all or a subset of the administrative team in terms of signing that conflict of interest. No one, I mean, in reality, none of us can obligate the district to a contract as an administrator. It has to go to the board. That's our policy, is that
Mhm.
all contracts go to the board for a signature. So, now I will tell you, in retrospect, you go back and you look at, or retroactively, I guess, you go back and you look, we had building administrators signing contracts, so now I know, that you'll see things like DJ contracts, for
Mhm.
school dances and stuff like that, because we've made it very clear to our administrators that they don't have the authority to sign that contract. They can't obligate the district to it. Now, so the reality is, we can't commit those kind of resources absent board approval. But I would also say that the administrators recommend contracts to the board, and so therefore, if you've got a building administrator recommending a contract to the board, I think it would be appropriate for them to have also signed the conflict of interest piece, because if they recommend it to you and you don't know about it, you may not have a conflict of interest, but you should know if they do. So, beyond the administrative team though, I don't think you get contracts that get recommended to us from further down, certainly you mentioned teachers, they're not gonna making those kinds of purchasing decisions.
Teachers, custodial
Yeah,
staff.
I know that one of the emails said that, at the University of Iowa, all employees
All
sign it?
employees sign
So
a
is it-
conflict of interest.
Is it every employee in the district?
Every single employee, from the custodial staff to the front desk
So do you-
secretary to
do you-
myself.
Do you do it through like the self-service
We
portal?
do. We have
Okay.
a self-service
Because
portal.
we talked about that today, because we thought if that was where that we wanted to go as a district, that we would probably see if we could build that into public school works, so that there was a small tutorial that went
Mhm.
along with it, and then at the end, you signed off that you'd done the tutorial. Sometimes we put quizzes with them, you know how that drill runs. Yeah, you either have the tutorial and then you sign, I've participated in the tutorial and I understand it and blah, blah, blah. Or you could have some quiz questions built in there if we decided we needed to, and then in the end, you sign off on it. So that we're not trying to maintain that via paper process, but we actually have it built into public
Yeah.
school works. Either one of those would work.
So the reason that you do that, right, and we do it at our business as well, but the reason you do it is that so you don't have to think about every new person that gets hired on a case-by-case basis. All right, does that person need it?
Yeah.
But it's not so much
That people-
you're necessarily signing that you don't have a conflict or you do have a conflict, right? There's a
You have a knowledge of
yeah.
conflict of
There's
interest.
a policy that has conflict disclosure that you have to abide by, and you're signing off that, yep,
I'm
I
aware of
understand that
that.
policy.
Right.
Yeah.
And that's like our acceptable use policy for computers. You're signing off, you know what the policy is, the things I can and can't do with the computer that I check out from the district, and I'm accepting responsibility for it. So it's the same kind of idea.
So that actually had caused me to remember, we do that annual process, and then there's a secondary process that they specifically ask us. It's another electronic thing, whether or not we have conflict of interest and whatever. And to specify and outline, you either check no or you go in to list it. So it is that acknowledgement that I'm aware there's a conflict of interest policy and that I'm supposed to report any perceived or real conflict of interest that I might have. And then maybe 6 months later, I get this other notification. It's time for your conflict of interest attestation. What is that word? Declaration, whatever. It's
Yep.
asking me to confirm whether or not I have any.
So I
Not sure we need to do both. I'm just
Yeah,
saying
seems a little
that
weird.
yeah.
it's. Oh, never mind. I'll say that for later.
Well, we could definitely reach out to the university and better understand their system and how it works, and see if there's a way for us to, piggyback on that process, or see if we can make that process work for us. Because we've got public school works, which I know you haven't had to deal with inside here, but that's our process for managing that. I mean, it's our bloodborne pathogens, it's background checks, it's all that other stuff. So it's sexual harassment, right? So it gives us that opportunity, just like and I just did a UI one because I'm on a search committee, and so I have to do that. What are the ethical components of a search thing? Kind of
Right.
take the quiz and all the rest of that stuff. So I think we could build that into public school works, and I think if we saw a prototype in terms of how does it work in the university, I think it'd be pretty straightforward to build. They may even have one that we just don't have turned on yet. So I'm happy to reach out to them and see if I can get a little bit better explanation of that. But I think we can come up with a solution that does more than just say it's on the books, but actually has some affirmative process where people have to be aware of it, sign off that they're aware of it, if they have a conflict, declare it. I don't think that would be an incredibly onerous task to go through. I mean, it's work, but I think it's doable.
And so then, but for the board, ours would be paper, correct? Since we don't do public work.
We could get you a public school works account. Then you could think about it though, you could do bloodborne pathogens.
I don't
you
need
could-
bloodborne pathogens.
I sign off of that every year. As
What other fun
I'm
things
good
do
to
we
go.
get to
There's all
do?
kinds of fun
There's all
stuff.
kinds of fun we get to do on an annual basis.
I think paper would suffice for this. How many of us? 7, 8? How
Yeah.
many?
7.
So,
Yeah.
What are you new here?
let let me reach out to UI and see what they got, and, because I think that'd be pretty easy to turn into a paper form too, so that it mirrored whatever the employees do.
Okay.
Does that sound good?
Mm-hmm.
I'll reach out, I think probably Cheryl Reardon has that stuff, I'll reach out to her first and see if she
Yeah.
can help us out with that.
Paul, did you have anything else in 200?
Well, I was gonna say something about the.
Oh, go ahead,
I
sorry.
was waiting. I didn't want to attack you. I just thought, I think it's important that all of the policies get reviewed, at least when someone comes on board, or they know what they are.
Mm-hmm.
And then once a year, whatever, you sign it as a director.
Oh, okay.
You know what I'm saying? So when you come on, you need to,
Mm-hmm.
here's all the policies, you need to read through them. Once you do that, you
True.
can sign off on it, and then we're expected to keep up with them as well as we go through.
Well, that's
Because it
part of
isn't-
our organizational meeting, right? Is the first thing we do is accept all of the policies
Right.
and whatever of the
Right.
board. I mean,
But you're
that
saying
could be
you
a
actually
little more
want people to go through
explicit.
and sign off that they.
Well, the newly elected people for sure.
Yeah.
Because it is in Iowa code that, 270.97, I think it is what I wrote down here. The whole conflict of interest is in
Mhm.
there, so I mean, it's
Right.
spelled out before you.
I wonder if you want to.
You should know that.
I wonder if you want to do
Yeah.
that in 202 and have a guideline in there, like a 202.5G kind of thing that says, the new board members will review the policies and attest to that within a certain period of time. We could write something up like that.
Sure. I mean, you write it up and we'll take a look at it and,
We'll give them a length of time, 3 months or something like that. I mean, there's a lot of stuff to read through, but, we can
Yeah.
at least get some drafted in there for you.
While we're on that one, just because we're still there, Director Hemingway had asked about changing the monetary value from 2,500 to 1,000. He didn't give a reason, at least that I've heard, so I don't understand.
Which one was that again?
What he said to me when he
It's in the
called and
beginning of
asked about it
203.
is,
203?
First paragraph.
$1,000 is about $100 a month, and that's significant.
it's 12, never mind.
Okay, let's see.
I'm pretty sure that the 2,500 isn't that in the code of how much that's the dollar amount that a school board member can actually receive from a school district.
I think it is.
Yeah, in a fiscal year.
I mean, I think it's in the code already. Is that number?
Because you can hold a position within the district as long as you don't get paid more than that.
Right.
I vaguely remember that being what the number is. I could be wrong, but
No,
I
think
just
you're-
read it not
I
that long
think
ago.
you're- Yeah, I think you're right
somewhere.
on that one.
Can we double check on that, where that
Yep.
2,500 came from?
We sure
Because
can.
I don't want to blindly
Mhm.
start changing a dollar amount based on $100 a month for 10 months.
Yep, we can definitely do that.
And I have a couple other ones in this.
From Director Hemingway.
No. There was 2064. Did I ever bring that one up?
2064.
What, is that about the treasurer?
Yes.
Yeah,
Which we, like Leslie is the treasurer.
Right, I think
So I'm pretty
there's
sure
just-
Leslie's the treasurer.
there's just needs to be a point of clarification for Director Rotland that we're not talking about an elected treasurer from the board members.
Correct.
It's a district employee that
Right.
serves as our treasurer,
Yep.
and it's appointed by the district,
Um,
but I should probably read the
It
policy.
is, the board may appoint a treasurer from its employees other than the position requiring a teaching certification or from the public. To finalize the appointment, the treasurer will take the oath of office during the meeting, which the individual is appointed no later than 10 days thereafter. So, it's part of our organizational meeting.
Okay, so we do this.
And it's there's actually two of them, so there's the treasurer, and I think it's the one right before, is 2065 is the secretary, right? Yeah.
Right, and that's Craig.
Yep, so,
Okay.
And they're not taking the oath of office every single year, right?
every other year when we do our organizational meeting is when they take their
I think
oath.
we looked into that, and they don't have to,
No.
unless it changes.
Unless it
Right.
changes and a new person is appointed.
The
they
oath
should
changes
take-
or the person changes.
Yeah.
Right,
Yeah, I was gonna say,
Okay.
So that's part of the organizational meeting, but I think that we can ensure that those appointments are really clear at our
Mhm.
meeting in November.
All right.
Sorry, 200.
What's that?
That's all I had in 200.
Well, yeah, I think that was all that we had, period, in the 200 from people that raised.
So-
Besides, the Director Rowland asking to have the review dates listed at the bottom of the policy.
Yeah.
I mean, that's for all of them.
And I would agree with that. The one thing that's a challenge is she asked about transferring them over. That's actually one of the reasons I was
Yeah.
gonna grab the binders before. And because there's not a literal translation from one policy to another, they're not the same. I don't think you can lift all of those and put them in there, but I think we can definitely,
Start from here out.
we can start from here on out, just like
Right.
we do, reviewed on, adopted on, reviewed on. We had talked about going on a 4-year cycle to make
Mhm.
sure that every board member during their term has the opportunity to do an in-depth review of the entire cycle of all the board policies. So I think that was part of that.
Okay. Sounds good.
yeah, I'm just trying to think of somewhere in the middle ground of just starting from here and basically having nothing from before day one, and then the other end of that being just grab this whole set of dates and slap them
Yeah.
on there, because they are all over the
Yeah,
place.
right.
We can't really do that. I'm just wondering if there's
The other ones you
something
could do-
somewhere where you could say this section was
Well,
The only ones you could do
is
is
last
the
reviewed
ones
by
that
the
are
board on a
required.
date or something. But
What's that?
The only ones you could really do it to are all the ones with the letters at the end of them that are
The
the
guidelines.
guidelines that
Yeah.
have on their own.
I'm not
That's it.
coming up with anything. That's my problem.
Yeah.
I'm trying to find
Well,
out. So
and-
yeah, I
and
mean, at the
maybe-
very least, we have an adopted date, and then every
And
time
maybe
after
one
that has
thing
a
to keep
review.
in mind is that we have, I don't know what you call it, the offline web, that we have all of this stuff. It's not going to go away. So it's in the archive. We have all of the old policies and whether it's linkage or direction or whatever it is, we've got all that in there. So it's always available from a reference standpoint. So as P&G committee members go through it, it's very easily accessible to us from the inside.
I was gonna say, so when this is all said and done, we have our 1s through 9s or whatever
Mhm.
we have. They're gonna exist as individual series, or it's gonna be one. It's all
Yes.
gonna be on the web page or
Yep.
something as 100 series.
Yep.
I mean, can there be a statement right there with the link that says previous policies
yeah.
are archived here, and you can click
yeah,
that
that's a
button?
good
Absolutely.
idea.
Yep, that's very easy to do. Because the page will still be there, so we can just have it accessible.
Mhm. No, sorry, there was a second point that Director Rowland brought up. The web links connected to
Oh.
actual forms.
Yeah, and I forgot which one she was looking at there. Oh, she didn't cite specific policies.
I was gonna say, I remember there actually being forms all throughout this
Yeah,
thing.
that's what, like, I
so-
think there are the,
What did we,
Well, and I wonder if it's like, say, the bullying and harassment. So that's a policy, but then it's
The
either
actual
an
form.
exhibit or,
Okay.
what's the other word I want to use?
guideline? Or,
Behind it,
rule
that,
or reg?
reg, yeah,
Yeah,
that
reg.
is the form itself, so it's
Yeah.
a separate,
okay.
I was gonna say, I think they.
Yeah, we shouldn't, we
That's why the
actually, Kim and
900
I
is so damn
talked
long.
about that, and we actually tried not to put any links in as, actually because of the very issue that she mentions of the broken links issue.
Mhm.
So we tried not to do that. So I guess if, I would say to her, if there are specific places where she's found any links, and she lets us know, I think we'd be happy to convert those into actual documents and make sure that they're included in there.
Okay.
And then while we were discussing that, I did look up pay.
Yeah.
And Iowa law prohibits board members from earning more than $2,500,
Yeah.
so it's the number that's in Iowa law.
Okay. So,
Okay, so we don't need to look that up.
and what was the actual code? What?
I would have to look that part up, but I just went on Iowa Association of School Boards, frequently asked questions about school board elections,
Got
and they
it.
cover it in there, but I could search the Iowa code and find
Sorry.
the exact number if you would like.
That's okay, thank you. Okay, that was fun.
So the 200,
Moving on.
200s are looking good. Thank
Yep.
you for your assistance with that.
Hopefully, other board members will be able to get in to read the 100, 200s, and 900s as we continue to work, and if there's any other changes. I don't want us to get too far out there and then
Yeah.
something. But I will remind others to come in and read the binders that Kim and Steve worked hard to put together for us. Kim mostly. Diving into the 300s.
Do we want to
No.
wrap up real quick the 900s that we've already done? Is there anything we want to talk about there?
I don't, well, we can. Is there
I mean,
any
we have been numerical, and I'm just wondering if we should just,
Yep.
the 1s, 2s, and 9s, call them good. And
Sure, that sounds like a great idea.
I don't even know if there is anything to talk about in the 900s.
Big
I
one
don't
was
know.
that changed volunteers. Do you see that highlighted on the first page?
Mm-hmm.
So that's 9032.
I think that's the only change.
Yeah.
I don't remember there being any board commentary on any of this stuff.
No,
It
there
wasn't.
There wasn't. It's all pretty straightforward stuff.
See, 900's done. 90,
See?
300.
There you go.
Thank
bad.
you.
Sorry, Chair.
The 300, I don't know.
The only entertaining part about the 900 that we talked about is remember it has unmanned drones in it, which
Yeah,
was a brand new thing for us. So
all right.
besides that entertainment.
So do we want to just go like we did the other ones? I
Sure.
mean, we probably will try
more
and get
meat
through
to
as
these.
many as these.
Yep.
All right. Management. Any conversations with this one? What? Am I talking to myself?
Yeah.
Okay.
No, I think I don't know if it'll come up as a question, but I think an important line is like one of the first ones there in 300 that specifically says that the 400 series policy also applies to administration,
Yes.
because there is less stuff in this one than there is in the
Mhm.
400s,
Yeah, you
and I
can
don't
see
know
when
if
you look at it.
Mhm.
that's
Yeah.
going to come up as, well, where's all this stuff? And
Mhm.
that line is an
It's-
important part, and that I don't know if we need to.
Yeah, so if
Make
you
sure
think
we
about it,
emphasize
the
that to everyone, that
300s
it's there.
The 300s are really the in addition to.
So maybe, yeah, I don't know, people just have to read, I mean, unless you move that where that's the first line.
Well, I was wondering, I was going to look real quick. It's the beginning of the 400s. Does it also have a sentence that says this applies?
I don't remember
I
To
that.
don't
everyone.
think so.
I don't think,
remember
no.
that.
I don't know if it's worth it to have it in both places. In my head, I would have them backwards in number order.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Right?
it doesn't.
Here's the one that applies to everybody, and then here's the one that applies to other people. But
I think they're.
Oh, wait, and towards the bottom it
does, yeah, I
says,
just
yeah,
looked at it.
300 series, yep.
I think they go in that order because they're going from school board to administration
Administration
to
to-
employee.
Yeah. So it goes 2, 3, 4 from that order.
makes sense.
Yeah, so there is in that very last paragraph, second to the last line. Unless administrative positions are specifically included from the policy or more specific policies in the 300 series.
Okay.
I think that's good.
All right.
Okay. Three oh one point one.
I think this is where going through the binders is kind of helpful to know, like, are we just making up brand new stuff here? Are we just taking stuff from other places that we already had existed? Because I don't want to word
Yep.
for word on 800 pages of stuff.
You
if
actually
we've already
get
done it.
a little opportunity to see the sausage be made, for instance. So if you look at 3022, for example, as you're scrolling through there, you'll note that there's a section that's highlighted in yellow. So when you get the draft version of these from the IASB, there's a lot of notes in there. So when we did the 1s, 2s, and 9s for you, we were far enough out in front that we went through and said, get rid of this note, get rid of that note, because the note doesn't need to be in the policy. It's a reminder for you, for us, as we're drafting them, don't forget about this stuff, just, so that's it. So you're gonna see a lot of yellow highlighted stuff in the 3s and 4s, and that's just because Kim and I were able to do the 1s, 2s, and 9s, and I've got some other folks on the admin team reviewing these, and we were reluctant to take any notes off until
They were
Chase
done.
and Amy and Matt had gone through there, and they're still in the process of going through there, so, in that sense, it's a good opportunity for you, but, if you look down at 3021, note for more detailed discussion of this issue, see the ISB policy primer from June 8th of 2007. Those aren't the kinds of things we'll keep in there as you go through and adopt them. More than anything else, they're for us as we write them to make sure that if there's anything that we need to keep in mind, that if we need to go back and take a look at it, we do. So those things that are highlighted in yellow will wind up getting pulled out before we actually bring them forward to the board for a vote.
Okay, I'd like to point out that 3022 is before and after 3021.
Oops.
Wow. How do you like that?
Yeah.
They say the same thing. They just say that twice.
Yeah.
Let's just make sure you're on your toes.
It's like, wait, why is the number going backwards? I know I probably started reading a little more fully at the beginning, and then by the end I probably skimmed a lot more. But I know we had kind of worked on a whole review cycle schedule and kind of changed it. Does this kind of reflect all that? I don't have all those dates in my head. I know in here there was sort of a timeline of stuff.
Yep, if you go to 3025G1, so that G, remember, that's our mental note that this is ours, belongs to the Iowa City Community School District, independent of IASB. So you see in 52G1, this is the piece that we went through last time where
These
we
are the
did all
dates,
the
so-
revisions.
okay.
So this is the updated one there.
I kind of made the assumption that it was, and I
Yep.
was like, well, I should at least ask. But it's interesting that they had the note of boards that have more detailed evaluation procedures should include these here. And
There you
weren't
go.
we asking for other examples of more detailed evaluation procedures? So like, well, does anybody have those there? Anybody else that's got this?
I don't know if anybody else does. We didn't really go and look at that.
I'm bringing it up just because I think it'll get brought up when these get reviewed, but 3024, page 2, the second bullet point.
Oops, I'm ahead here.
302.
Not arguing it, I just think that in our discussion,
3024.
Attend such
Boundaries.
conventions. That
just keep me top of mind that might be one
Yeah,
that gets challenged.
I think it's in the contract
What
and
are you
in the
looking at?
current job
302.
description.
302.4.
Page 2, second bullet.
Oh, page 2.
and I'm sorry, Steve. You said that's in
It's in the
the
contract and in the current job description.
that
Our
that's-
job description is essentially this one.
Okay,
Yeah.
so we
So-
can point to our job description that we hire superintendents on.
Yeah. I think actually it's in the teacher job description too.
I think, the line that I think stands out to me based on, as Paul said, that it might get brought up as a thing, is, kind of current state and how much of that stuff happened. And, in the very last sentence there underneath all the bullet points is that, in executing those duties, consider
Mhm.
the school's district's financial situation. I mean,
Yep.
it's in there to
Mm-hmm.
do
Where's
it.
your balancing?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
Yep.
So I think that's an important line.
that's a good point.
There's an extra page. I know I saw this before when I looked at it, I forgot.
There's like a blank page in there.
Yeah,
That
page
didn't surprise me because I
16.
was trying to merge those quick before
Yeah.
I posted the agenda, so
And I caught that before and forgot about it.
I can go through and
Is
clean it up.
the 3025, the actual evaluation page, is that ISB language or is that our language?
325G1.
No, just the
5 is,
3025.
Their
I think,
language.
their language.
Because it specifically says, like what parts you're being evaluated on.
And that comes
And-
from the Iowa, ISL, Iowa School Leaders, there's another S in there. It's ISSL, Iowa State School Leaders. These come right out of the ISL pieces. So if you remember from my eval, that there's a column in there that has ISL, and I've got numbers in there that it's directly linked to the ISL standards. These are right out of the ISL standards. So that's where they got them, which interestingly enough, I know this policy will wind up being changed because there's now a new set of standards called PESL. And they have not fully incorporated it yet because they're reviewing it. When they get PESL reviewed, I'm sure that will show up here in place of that. All it's gonna do is change the numbering format for me because it's essentially, it's ISL with, instead of 6, there's now 10.
Iowa standards for school leaders.
Iowa standards for school years, thank you.
And
So
then
PESL is
follow
professional
Google Pro.
school, something, I don't even remember what PESL stands for. But,
He'll tell you.
There's
in a minute.
Professional standards for school?
yeah, professional
Like
standards,
Kevin.
professional standards for educational leaders, excellent, thank you, Sean. So PESL is 10, so this one is 6, so you'll see 10 the next time they redo it. That's what that is.
And moving on. Five G is our process. 302.6, superintendent professional development.
I don't know that most of that is any different than what happens now. It talks about bringing it to the board president if it's a long thing or whatnot. I don't know if we always necessarily get a report after an event that's
We used-
explicitly listed there.
We used to, and then I was directed to stop sending those. That was a few board iterations ago. You remember those? Kim used to get copies of them. So I would always just write up a relatively short, you guys don't need to read pages and pages of stuff, but I would just give you a quick summary.
I mean,
So-
I guess I have no problem getting a quick summary email. Like, I don't need a report at the board table or anything like that, but if you send a
Yeah.
quick email, hey, last week I was doing this.
Yep.
Wouldn't
That's
mind reading
very,
that, and
very easy to do.
if you don't want to read it, you don't
Want to read
I
it,
guess.
yeah. I mean, so is that, okay, we can leave that line in there
Mhm.
and,
Well, I'm just saying, if the line's gonna be in there,
yeah,
Yep.
we should probably follow it.
yeah.
Yep, happy to do that once that starts, to be honest with you, because it's a measure of accountability on my part, but it's also an opportunity for you to see where the value add is,
Okay.
right? I mean, we do that with, we frequently ask teachers and administrators, we won't want this at the board table, but we frequently ask teachers and administrators, you probably do this at the university too, if you've been out, is there something that you've learned out that you can present in?
Absolutely.
And it can be as informal as lunch and learn kind of thing,
Mhm.
or as formal as at our October PD session where we have leaders, or we have teachers leading PD sessions. They may lead something that they learned from outside in.
Mhm.
So you probably,
Yeah.
I know I've done like lunch and learns at the university in the EPLS department, and a lot of that stuff people are bringing back in.
I like that.
So I won't lunch and learn you, but I'm happy to start providing you updates on that.
Well, I guess I would, give my little summary, and if I want to find out more, that would be a
Absolutely.
discussion topic in our
Yep.
one-on-one meetings or whatever.
You bet.
If I want to know more about it.
Mhm.
3027, I know this has been brought up before in discussions about who pays whose dues and for what, but it's just nice to see it in writing.
Mhm.
And it also says board's judgment
Right.
decision, so.
And that's usually spelled out in contracts, don't we?
It's actually, there's a request in my contract, essentially, that I
Mm-hmm.
be engaged.
Okay. Is there anything else about that, 3027? 3028.
I'll just say again, just for the record, this has been discussed, and brought up numerous times. So to have a policy on it is good.
I actually think that my contract is more restrictive than this, which is
Mhm.
okay. Yeah, this, I think this says here's the policy, and then I think the benefit to you as a board is that the contract is actually more restrictive than this. Because it spells out what those things are in more detail, which I think
So
is
would,
good for the board.
but do we need to say, I don't know what I'm saying. Good,
That it's in contract?
yeah.
I don't think you have to do that. I think this
Okay.
just says you can do this, and then the contract just restricts it even further, so I think that's fine.
Got it. 3031.
Well, I wonder, do you have a line that says, I don't know, we have it in a lot of other places, like unless the contract explicitly states otherwise or something like that? Because my concern is that you'd then have a conflict between policy and contract potentially, and
Well,
one has to
My only
supersede
concern
the
with that
other.
is what if the contract is written more liberally? So if you said, except that the contract says otherwise, and I only say that because you could have a board that would extend a contract that was more liberal than the policy, and a subsequent board may not want that level of latitude. And now, if you have that language in there, it would actually imply then that the current board wouldn't have the ability, except through the negotiation of the contract, to restrict the latitude. This way, the board could negotiate, which we have, a more restrictive set of obligations, and would not have the latitude to negotiate a less restrictive set of.
I get your point,
Yeah.
but it seems to me that's just bad practice to negotiate something that goes against your policy.
Right, and it doesn't go against it.
No, if you were going to then make it more liberal than your
Right.
policy, like that seems like,
Yeah, well.
why would you? that's
And,
bad
and
practice, I
the
guess.
way that the contract is written, the contract actually says that policy supersedes the contract. I have to go back and look. Pretty sure that's what it says. Go back and take a look at that. But
No, we don't want that.
I think what you want to do is as long as it goes down the funnel, I don't know if you need to have it in here. I understand where you're going with it. You want to make sure that they're linked together, is really what you want to do.
Linked together, or somewhere it states which one supersedes the other one. If it's in the contract, that's fine, I get, right? But
Yep.
it's got to be written somewhere, because if it's not, if it doesn't explicitly say one supersedes the other and
Yeah.
they're different,
Let me find out.
then what do you do?
Let me find out what the recommendation is on how to write that. On 3031, just as an FYI, those underlying titles, we just lifted all the titles out of our, org chart and dropped them in there. So those are all just kind of the generic titles that are in there.
That's in our current,
Mm-hmm.
okay. Would there be any others? I mean, this covers everybody.
I would potentially, I lied earlier, I'm gonna wordsmith it. I would change the school district will have, I might say may have,
Oh,
because otherwise then you're locked into, you have to have those
Yeah,
yep.
specific positions.
okay.
So for instance, in a year you weren't gonna have a chief financial officer,
Mm-hmm.
hypothetically.
Hypothetically.
Then there's headline page.
That was my favorite page to read, the
I
blank
know, it
page.
was so easy.
It's the quick one.
3032.
I don't know. Having it beat into my head over and over that the board has one employee, the very beginning of it saying the board will employ building principals,
So.
seems a little weird to me.
So the weird part about that is, so even though it's that you have one employee, you as a board are required to approve all certified contracts. So that's why all teachers and administrators come to the board as part of that. Interestingly enough, we bring support staff, but that's not required. So you'll see when we get to support staff, it doesn't say that. So in here, it says you will employ because in the end, I recommend to you and you approve the contracts, which you're right, kind of goes against the grain of that idea that you have one employee kind of idea. But because of my employment contract is with you, everybody else's employment contract is with the district.
Right.
But, so you do approve them, so I think that's why they wrote it the way they did.
Well, my only question is, the line about in keeping with the law, the board will consider the veteran status of applicants. When do we get told whether or not somebody's a veteran?
That's part of the application process. There's a affirmative.
But we don't consider it. I'm just a little, I don't know. I
Yeah,
just know.
she's right there. The
Yeah.
board's
The
not
last two
considering
sentences.
it.
The board,
really-
yeah, the board,
Two cents.
it's not the board, it's the district.
Right, but it says,
Yeah.
yeah, so,
I think in that second paragraph, you may want that to read, instead of the board in each one of those, you may want that to read the district.
okay.
Yeah, but this is board policy.
Yeah.
It does,
says
all
board. We
those
don't.
sentences in the second, and third and fourth paragraph. Because, keep this in mind too, which is really kind of weird.
Then it's,
The second to
last
last
line.
paragraph is the responsibility of the superintendent to make a recommendation to the board. The board
Mhm.
will act only on the superintendent's recommendation.
Right.
So here it's saying you're gonna do that. Up there, it's saying essentially you're reviewing applications, but you're not doing that.
right, so it should say the district
Yeah.
and leave the last part because we're acting on
Right,
what you present to us,
right.
assuming that you took all this other
Yeah.
thing into consideration.
In the second and third paragraph.
Right.
In there.
Because the interesting thing is, I mean, if you
Should
think
change.
about like deans and assistant principals and athletic directors, those people are interviewed out at the building level. And the screening process takes place through that electronic screening platform, but that's not done by anybody here, it's done out at the building level.
The last sentence also, the last sentence of the whole thing also is a little
Yeah.
weird, because we
Yeah.
would only hire a consultant or assistant for hiring a superintendent.
yeah.
So we should strike that.
Or you could just change
Say-
it to the board may contract for assistants in the search for administrators. And the only reason you may want to, or for a superintendent rather, the only reason you may want to have that in there is if people question
Why are we
why
doing
you've
this?
retained.
Yeah,
Was it Hazard Young?
I think that's in
Mhm.
there.
Yeah.
That's- I thi-
Superintendent one, yeah, it's in 302.1, it says the board may contract for assistants in the search for a superintendent.
so then we
Then
don't need
I'd
it
strike
there.
it down there, because then it's just redundant.
So get rid
I
of
would
it.
strike that line.
Okay.
So did you get the other changes
I
too?
did, yep,
Okay.
I'm making them
It-
on
Oh.
my
It's,
original as I go, so thank you.
the one for administrators is basically the same wording as the
Yeah, it
one for
is.
superintendent, which,
Yeah, which is probably why
Why
it
it's,
yeah.
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 reads like that, which is kind of weird. All right, now where am I?
I don't know if we have the catch-all of other factors deemed relevant by the board, but I don't know if it's important in choosing an administrator. It talks about district's educational philosophy and everything. I don't know if we want to put in there the comprehensive equity plan or something else that is something else we have that goes directly towards recruitment and hiring. You know what I mean? That little middle sentence there, talk about
Mhm.
when you're looking at people, consider this, this, and this. Well, we have a whole nother thing that we have out there that should be considered, which I guess is other factors
I think
deemed
those are other
relevant.
factors
Yeah.
deemed relevant.
But I don't have a problem with explicitly putting it there either. Either there or I guess in
The only
superintendent
issue
one.
that you might have with that is I think the comprehensive equity plan is more flexible or fluid than the board policy. and you might change the comprehensive equity plan more frequently than you change board policy. So I think if you have other factors, I think it'd be easier to write into the comprehensive equity plan that that should be considered as an other factor according to policy 3012 than to write it the other way around. See what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's easier if, when factors come up, you say, hey, you include this as a hiring factor. We put that in there, so that then those things are considered as other factors, because it could be gender balance, it could be race and ethnicity, it could be language orientation. I mean, there's a whole bunch of things that you could look at that you would say, we want, based on our current administrative pool, we want you to focus on these things as part of the comprehensive equity plan, and those could be a little bit more fluid. But that way you could give us the directive as you refine the equity plan to include those when we do that as the other factors.
I'm wondering if on this one where we're kind of, the second and third paragraph, if we just change the word, anytime that says the board,
Mm-hmm.
only the second, third paragraph to superintendent.
Could
would
do
make
that.
more sense, and then you get to the fourth paragraph. that
Sure, because
says
then it ties into superintendent's recommendation.
And we should
Mhm.
follow that.
So instead of district, we're saying
Superintendent.
Superintendent,
I like
okay.
that.
Don't just add or replace though, because there's one place where it should say board.
Well, the fourth, just the second, third paragraph.
Yeah, I know, but the very last word of this
Oh,
third paragraph should still say board, I think.
Yeah.
Yes.
Well,
Yes.
where the hell is the superintendent decides?
And then we,
I think that should say board.
and then we take out the last,
Last.
the fifth paragraph.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that
Got that,
last
yeah.
line should go above
Yep.
it.
That should be stricken.
Struck.
Stricken, struck, out. How about that?
Striked.
get it
Stuck
out
it
of there.
Oh, okay, sorry.
We're getting punchy already.
It's not a good sign, we're only on page 18.
So if we move on, then that's the, when we're discussing, so like the first paragraph is the length of contract for employment between an administrator and the board will be determined by the board
Board.
as stated in the contract. Is that where you're talking about language, where we're still approving it, or is that where we should also kind of look at, is that worded right?
Well,
Contract.
isn't there a contract between? I mean, even though
Oh,
he
I know what it is.
recommends-
Yeah, because the state law stipulates that you can't, whether it's with me or any of the other members of the administrative team, you can't sign an open-ended contract with them. That's why this is written the way it is. So the length of contract has to be determined, and it has to be stated explicitly in the contract. So that's the state statute.
And their contract is between the board and us, or?
No, it's determined, the length is determined by the board
Oh,
and then
got it.
included in
Sorry.
the contract, yeah. And then the terms of employment, so we have that all laid out in there.
Right, I guess it's the first part of that we're at. So it says the length of the contract for employment between the administrator and the board.
And what they're
That's
really
the part
talking
of
about is the
questions.
contract between the administrator and the board as opposed to the length. The
Good.
length issue is, that way that's written, the clause in there is kind of goofy.
Because it's only, this is written implying that we're only determining the length of it, not
Right.
the actual contract.
Right. If you took that out, the sentence could read, the length will be determined by the board and stated in the contract. That's the clause in the middle, which is not delineated by commas, that's what they're taking out.
So it would be the length for employment.
Yeah, the length of the contract for employment.
You guys have completely lost me in what's the problem with it? Like, I'm not seeing any problem with that sentence.
The length of the contract for employment between the administrator and the board will be determined by the board and stated in the contract, but the contract is not between
The board and
board and the administrator.
Oh, but see, again, they're saying that, I get what you're coming, I get where you're at now. They're saying that because, again, you have to approve it. So they're looking at it as the board approves the contract as required by state law. I'm sure that's the reason they're writing it like that. space in there too,
What?
between those two paragraphs, on 3033.
Sure is. Not anymore.
See, because then you get down to that third paragraph. Just kind of
Okay.
confusing them.
All right.
No, I just
Yeah.
keep going back to the same type of, I think,
Yeah.
thought process you had earlier, where the board has one employee,
Right.
the district has a bunch of other ones.
I think they're using some of that interchangeably in here, which I think makes for some of the confusion.
Mhm.
Yeah, it seems like you could just say the length of contract for employment of an administrator
Mm-hmm.
will
Will be
be
determined by the board.
approved by the board and stated in the contract.
Yeah.
You caught on. That's what we were trying to say.
And he figured it out.
It's recorded, you can go back to the brilliant pearl of wisdom there.
Okay. Anything else in that section?
So is that what we want to do, is strike those? The length of the contract for employment of an administrator will be determined by the board and stated in the contract.
Yes.
Contract will also
Yeah.
state terms of the employment. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, administrative salary and other compensation.
So this is your meet and confer process?
Mm-hmm.
Just with all of our non-represented groups, it just gives the full discretion of that to the board.
Is there any concerns there? All right, administrative duties, 3035.
I assume this is being looked at by somebody who knows what the administrator's duties should be
This is
much more
this is
keenly
a
than
big
me.
generic list that applies to everybody. So our contracts with the administrators actually provide this plus more detail. So, and because it depends on the, and actually, let me back that up. The job descriptions provide far more detail than what's in here, because they're very prescriptive for each administrative position, dean, AD, principal, et cetera.
Is attendance center just the legalese for school?
Yep.
Okay, that's kind of weird,
Yeah.
Tom.
I, like I said, I would defer to
Yeah.
Matt and Amy to tell me
Yeah.
if there's
Mhm.
stuff that needs to get removed or added
that'll-
there.
There's a lot more stuff in the job descriptions for any one position than the stuff that's in here. This stuff is really kind of generic compared to what's in there, and it's kind of a hodgepodge of stuff that would be, because in a lot of districts, you don't have lots of different administrators at different levels, so they've kind of taken all that stuff and folded it all in here. We've parsed it all apart, because what a principal does, what an AP does, what a dean does are all very different, so that's why if you were to take those job descriptions, for example, and plug all those bullets in here, you'd have like 3 pages of bullets, so.
This is just a maybe clarification question, but in the last paragraph, what duties would a board delegate to administrators?
If you look in our job descriptions, it would be the last bullet in everyone, which is other
Other
duties as assigned.
But what, is it when we ask, say, Chase for something from the board table, is
But I
that
guess we would direct
Yeah.
Steve to do
Yeah.
that.
true?
Yeah.
Steve would direct them to do that.
True.
It wouldn't come from us.
Yeah.
He'd direct them to do that. That's all, I guess that's what I didn't know what it would be.
I guess I would kind of think back to when we were deep in the school pairing kind of
Oh, sure.
Like we were saying we need to get input from, like
Yep.
school administrations. And yes, it funneled through Steve, I see that point too, but I mean, that was us saying, hey, we're gonna need the administrators to do
Sure.
dot, dot, dot.
And it gives
Which I
you the
guess is us
latitude.
delegating it.
Yeah.
It gives you the
But-
latitude if you need to
But I-
ensure direct contact communication with any subordinate role inside the organizational chart.
Yeah, I see the way it reads is,
We
I'd
have
go into a school and
authority,
tell a principal,
yeah.
hey, I'm delegating you some stuff to do now, which is not appropriate, right? So.
Yeah.
I
Hopefully
can see
that's
that.
read though as the board's authority, as the board as a unit.
It may
But
not.
still, us 7 holding hands walking into a school to tell the principal to do something is not
Yeah.
appropriate either,
Yeah.
as much fun as that sounds.
I mean, I don't have a problem with it, I was just curious why it's,
Yeah.
I mean, there could be a time when we don't have a superintendent at the moment, so maybe you're acting
Sure.
in that.
I suppose.
And one of the things, and just to keep this in mind too, remember this is written for 330 districts in the state.
Yeah.
And sometimes when I read these, I try to read them as if I'm in Lone Tree with 400 kids. Because sometimes that's how many kids they have in Lone Tree. Sometimes that makes more sense to me when I read some of these to think, oh, well, yeah, then that makes sense for Lone Tree. Doesn't make sense for us or Des Moines or Davenport, but it makes sense for Lone Tree. So
Yeah.
might be one kind of lens to look at it as you're going through. Oh, look at that.
Some
I
like-
left some blanks in there.
Well, it specifically has the note as to what
Yeah.
it should either be board or superintendent putting in the blank. And that's funny because we were discussing that in the previous sentences.
Now, do we have our own administrative evaluation process? That
We
should
do.
be 306G or something, I don't know.
We could put that in there.
I mean, like, we have our superintendent evaluation process. Shouldn't we, so people can understand that this is the guideline, but this is what Iowa City follows?
Yep.
I think it would be helpful to have it in there, I know, have public input
Yeah.
on whether or not people are in the right roles and how that evaluation goes, so.
I think it would be
At the same point,
beneficial
then
for
say
them to
here
know
it is.
what the tool is.
That there is a
Right.
tool, and we're not,
We do that with the collective bargaining agreement with the teachers, right? There's a tool and we, easily accessible. So yeah, I think that's 303.6G1 would just make that, put that administrator tool right in there.
And this is the easiest fill in the blank because that should not say board. I know that.
No.
okay.
We actually might put administrative supervisor because we've got multiple layers. So if you're in Lone Tree again, the superintendent's probably, doing every admin eval. I think there's like 2 administrators there.
There's,
Um,
I know I read it somewhere. Somewhere else said that
yeah,
there was some language that said where it says superintendent, it could also be construed as superintendent's
I think that's
designate.
in 200, isn't it? I remember
think
us.
so.
It's in there
adding it.
somewhere.
I think it's in 200 there, where there was some place where we had
Superintendent
to edit
designate,
that.
yeah.
Yeah, I think it says superintendent or designee.
Yeah, it should say something like that.
I think that's exactly the term, Ken.
Because you don't evaluate every administrator.
Oh, no, like, your deans
No.
of students out there, I'm not doing the evaluations on that.
You're
Usually that's an
doing-
AP, and then the principal's doing the AP, and then Amy and Matt are doing the principals, and I'm doing Amy and Matt, so.
Or you're doing, are you doing everybody up here, though?
No.
Amy, Matt,
Amy, Matt, Chase, Craig. So that's why
Okay.
I think what we did in 200, we can go back and look, but I think it was superintendent or designee,
Mhm.
okay.
so.
So that should be the same wording here.
Yeah,
Yeah.
we'd use
Mhm.
that same language, we'll look it up, but we'll make sure it's parallel with it, put it in there.
I'm always concerned. I see the reason, it says in there that there's a date established by law. I'm always concerned about having dates in there if we don't end up following it. So I want to make sure that we follow those,
The date.
right? I mean, it says we can pick an earlier date, but not a later date.
Mhm.
And so I just want to make sure
Well,
that,
if that's the latest date by law, then I think you would leave it in there, they could do it earlier.
Yeah.
I just want to make sure that
That's what
it's
we've
happening
adopted.
in practice.
Yep,
Yeah,
that's what we've adopted is
prior to
that.
that date.
and the practice is get it done before that date. requirement is no later than.
Okay.
I'm just used to working in a private place that you're lucky if you get one every 10 years.
Okay.
If ever, in some cases.
And on the other end, we have it yearly, so.
Yeah.
We're supposed to.
No news is good news, Sean.
The state's not telling us we
No.
missed our deadline or anything.
No.
There you go. 3037. We have way too much fun.
That's like the exact same
It
that
is.
you had, just with some words changed. I don't
Yep.
know, do you get a report from people after an event?
So
Because
usually.
it's in there.
Yep, usually what we do is at
Or
our
it
director
doesn't mean.
meetings, is they report out at director meetings. So they come back and in particular, because so much of it is, we're sending people to things that are directly pertinent to the stuff that we're working on.
Mhm.
So as they're giving us updates on projects that we're working on, so we just had a whole bunch of people doing PBIS, right? Well, PBIS has been a huge implementation process for us, so they come back and then they tell us, okay, here's what we're doing now, here's what we learned, this is why it's in here. So they report out through those director meetings.
I just wonder if it's simply just take out administrative will report after an event and not say who to.
That's true, because we actually
It's
give
not-
them a broader latitude, because we look at where's the applicable information that you're getting.
Are you okay with that, Paul? Sounds good. Come on, people.
You'll note that 3038 also looks very similar to the one we looked at
Yep.
earlier.
For the super.
Yep.
And just for
There's just a
your,
lot of latitude.
just for your,
Yeah.
I don't know, so you know where we're at with it, we actually try to make sure that as many of the civic organizations have somebody in them. So it's kind of like you're the morning optimist, you're the Kiwanian, you're the, and we try to make sure
Mhm.
that there's somebody
In
present.
that group.
And then we
Yeah.
do pay those dues,
Yeah,
clarifying, because you don't need a policy.
yeah.
Well, it says the board may.
The little note there it basically says if we're not paying the dues, we don't even need the policy there. But
Right.
it also says that we should, if we're paying the dues, we should have a thing that tells us that it's a legitimate thing. But
Yep.
Okay. Similar to what?
By the way, for the admin regulations, we don't have to, but we've done that. So all your Gs, like we're talking putting 303.6 G1 in there, we actually include all the regulations behind here in our policy manual so that you're not looking for them. So one of the things that it talks in here about is the board will be kept informed of the administrative regulations utilized in their revisions. You'll see those because they're connected to the policy.
Mhm.
Part of our process was we didn't want to make people have to look for them. So that's why we adopted a numbering policy that is directly correlated to the board policy manual so that there's no searching. So that people don't have to wonder where they are, have they been updated, et cetera, et cetera. They're directly linked to it. And part of that's because right now you can't find anything. So people don't know where it is. So this way we thought everyone would know exactly where it is. And you'll note that when you go through there, and I don't know if we've even seen it in here, but I know you see it in some of the other policy sections when you go through there, it'll specifically state that superintendent needs to have a regulation that goes along with that.
Mhm.
So it's connected right behind it. So you'll notice it in the yellow highlighted section at the end. It says, you need a regulation for this. Well, you're gonna find that then right directly behind it.
Okay.
Which then goes into the monitoring piece because it'll be part of our policy revision. So on that 4-year cycle, you'll see all those regulations.
yeah, I just scroll down to 304.1 where the first sentence is administrative regulations may be necessary to implement board policy.
Mhm. So is there any other feedback along with the regulation pieces? Okay.
You can get down to 305, and that ought to look kind of familiar too.
Yeah, the code of ethics.
Mm-hmm.
Any concerns with their code of ethics?
Just laughing at the professional school administrator does these things. The unprofessional school administrator, however,
Only hire professional.
Yeah, that is kind of, it's like the school administrator.
We'll have to revise 306.
Okay.
We filled in the blanks on, if you're down to 306, we filled in the blanks on 1, 2, and 3.
Okay.
This is before we started revising the org chart and the hiring process.
Mhm.
So,
Oh, sorry, on 305,
yeah.
Mhm.
let me just double check here. Give me one sec. You can discuss that, I'll come back to me.
Okay.
Okay.
All I was saying on
306.
306 was that we'll have to
need to
strike,
take some titles out.
strike 3 on there.
So it'll just be assistant superintendent.
Yeah.
Okay.
All right.
Um,
Going
Just
back to
Brenda
305.
Alexander
Yeah.
Haig.
So 305, the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 1. I'm curious if we should add that to our board of directors code of ethics.
Oh, I don't think it's
Using
in
the
there.
position for personal gain.
Oh,
Because I don't think that's in there.
It's
is it?
not.
It's
That's why I
not.
went back and looked.
Okay. I wonder why they have it in here and they don't have it in there, because there's so much parallelism, you can tell where they kind of
Yeah.
cut stuff and pasted in there. Well, I think that having the consistency is important. I don't know if anybody else has any problems with it. I don't.
Well, that would give consistency on that one line. Like, these are not even remotely similar to the board ones. I mean, they're quite a bit different.
Mm-hmm.
So
Yeah.
it wouldn't be consistent. But as a
I mean,
individual line, I think it's totally valid.
that one, and I think the last one also is one that I think.
Yeah,
could be
I
added.
definitely like the last line, commits to serving others above self.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, we can put in, avoid using the position for personal gain, but I like my certain seat at church, so I'm just joking. That was a joke. We can try that and see.
I mean, I like both of them, I'm just
Yeah.
thinking that they,
Do you feel either way about adding both to ours?
I think they're totally valid points for the board as well.
There. So let it be written. So let it be done. That's about the only time I can talk like Pharaoh. Okay. Were we done with 306?
Yeah, I don't think there's anything
Okay.
else in there.
307?
See, that's where it is. References to superintendent in this policy manual will mean the superintendent or the superintendent's designee. It covers it for the whole thing.
Yeah.
It's just at the end instead of at the beginning, which seems like it should be at the beginning.
Yeah, that's a little goofy.
Sorry. 307. Go. So we need to fill in a blank there, it appears.
Yeah, so lots of other places where they're fill in the blank, there's actually statutory timelines, there isn't here, so it's really a matter of kind of practice.
but don't we have it in our complaint?
It is in there, and I want to say it's 10 days in there, does that sound right? Yeah, I think it's
That's
10 days in there.
I think that would make sense to
Yeah, to
match
keep
that.
it consistent.
Yeah,
So can we just double check that, and if
Mhm.
it's whatever that is, put it in
make it
there?
in here, yep.
and it might be marked on, like I said, the 3s and 400s we really haven't gone through. We
Yeah.
have written changes in
We
the,
got some
Okay.
scribbling
in
in
the,
there, yeah,
binders,
Binder.
but not
yeah.
in
Well, we
these.
can look for
Yeah,
the
we'll definitely will.
consistency
Oh my goodness, that was the end of 300s.
It is.
Oh, wow.
I don't know if Then get to the 400. 400
It's
is
okay.
pretty,
They're pretty long.
They're pretty long.
pretty long.
Yeah, they're 187 pages. We just did 30 pages.
Who's counting?
We don't, yeah, I'm okay with not going through it. I do want to make kind of a general comment on it,
Mhm.
as it struck me as I was kind of browsing through it.
Go ahead. I just wanted to clarify, we're gonna go through it as a group, but probably
Yes.
not tonight. Okay.
Yes, agreed. There's a lot of stuff in there that's in the contracts.
There is.
And it,
Yep.
I know as a visual, it seems kind of, I don't know, maybe not great for somebody on the outside looking at it, say, oh, this is getting slammed into a policy here. Does that mean it's getting yanked out of contracts? That's
No.
going to be the impression.
Yep.
So I want to be clear as to how that stuff got in there, because I know there are plenty of employees
Yep.
that aren't under contracts like that too. But that's the thing that kind of stands out in that whole 400 as you go through it. It's like there's a lot of stuff in here, like time off and things like that,
Yeah. I can
which is
see.
very contract heavy. And I want to make sure we're clear on what we're trying to do with that.
Yep, so we had a couple of conversations about that there, you remember way back when we started talking about moving things out of contract and into a handbook.
Mhm.
And there were real concerns about, from an obligation standpoint, whether or not the board would be obligated to those items that were in there. And I want to say it was JP that brought it up, because I know it came up actually during the negotiations process, was how do we know that subsequent boards are committed to this? And so then when we actually started looking at this, that was an aha for us, because we thought, well, if it's in policy, it requires a significant amount of work by the board to make any change to policy. And so there is an opportunity for us to look at, I think you said leave, for instance. So right now, it's in the contract, but if there's both language in policy that says there will be leave, and perhaps language in policy that says that this is how leave will be handled, there is actually the opportunity moving forward, if you want to take some things out of contract, but not move them into a handbook, but put them in policy, that just like the contract require a pretty significant revision process, that there might be, because one of the conversations that came up was, is there a way for us to standardize across employee groups? Things like holidays and leaves and bereavement and things like that. Putting it in policy would allow that standardization, and that board adoption of it then, I think, creates the opportunity to have a conversation at the negotiating table about, hey, do we need to have bereavement leave in there if there's a policy that sits over the top of it that provides us at least the same or better benefit than is provided inside the contract? I think where the employees were at that stage was they were really reluctant to give anything up, because there wasn't a guarantee that those types of benefits were provided somewhere else, and that they hadn't been afforded that level of security that went along with us. So this could potentially create that bridge opportunity to say, we don't need to include bereavement leave in a contract because board policy already stipulates it for every employee in the district. So it's a long range, there's a long range opportunity to have conversations about contract content, with potentially the opportunity to streamline contracts and standardize benefits across all employees in the district.
Yeah, and I get the benefit of the consistency, when we were, sounds like this year is a whole different story, but last year when we were
Yes.
doing it, and we were doing all the different groups, and they were all very different
Yep.
contracts. I mean, the wording is all over the place, and I understand, God, it would be so much easier if they had just all said the same thing.
Yep.
I get that, but even just the mention of, oh, if we have it here, it allows you to potentially remove it from the contract. Anybody hearing those words is going to immediately feel unease, right? And yes, having talked to the folks that, in the unions, they would prefer policy over a handbook.
Right.
but they would prefer contract over everything else, right? So it's not like they're like, yeah, put in policy, that'll be great, and then we can remove it all. So I think we need to tread lightly and at the very least be very, I guess, transparent's the word that gets thrown out there as to
Mhm.
what the intent is of having it there. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
So that it's not just, oh, slide it in there and let people wonder if that immediately means contracts are going to
Sure.
start having it ripped out there. Because I don't want, that's not my intent
Right.
as a policymaker is to, okay, how do I
Get rid of a contract.
do this shuffle, right?
No.
So
Yep.
I want to make sure that we're careful there. And the 400s have a lot of that in there. So I want to at least
Well-
have that conversation before we start.
You know, one of the
Going
nice
through
things
one
about,
piece at a
about
time.
having a break between now and then is that gives me the opportunity, which I can easily do, is to both, Brady from ICEA in terms of teachers and paras, but then also our SEIU reps to walk them through kind of the framework here and make sure that from an intentionality standpoint that they say, hey, yeah, we do or don't support having the kind of that playing field more delimited through the
But-
the board policy process.
But at the very beginning of our 400s, it says that our master contracts regarding such topics shall prevail.
Mm-hmm.
So,
Yeah.
I mean,
But I
Right.
think it.
But even the fact that you would put in there policy on what leave is, that just tells you that the contract's in charge now, but it gives you that first step towards taking that, right? Like as a visual,
Mhm.
that's what it looks like, right? So that worries me, and particularly when you start looking around at all the neighboring districts and what's going on when it comes
Yeah.
to contracts and things like. I mean, it's.
Well, the good news is I've got two meetings, two ICEA leadership meetings between now and our next P&G committee meeting. So I'll have a couple opportunities to talk to Brady about it. So if he needs to go back and get feedback from Rep Council, he'll have plenty of time to do that in between before I come back to you at the next one.
Yeah. I feel better at least having thrown that out there and
Yep.
saying, hey, it's here and let's
Yep.
have that discussion as opposed to, wait, what's policy now?
Yeah.
Because I don't know that a lot of people are necessarily following what we're doing at P&G meetings, right? And seeing that that's there, but
Probably not.
yeah.
it's something to think about. But, when we talk about intent, if I backtrack a little bit, because we have other directors asking for a fraternization policy, and the question that's in my head is, what's the intent there?
Yeah.
Like, what's the point of it? And
I
when
see
I
what you're
looked at
saying.
some of the examples that were sent to us, there's some that are somewhat exhaustive and some that's a sentence. And the one that's a sentence actually says it all. Like if you're in a supervisory role of somebody, you can't have a
Right.
relationship with that person.
Right.
And because I think that's the intent of it, because that's where the conflict arises.
Yeah.
And if we want a simple sentence like that, that's fine. There was one that expounded on why you could get into trouble with having
Yeah.
relations, and I was like, there's no need for that. If you don't want somebody supervising their spouse or something like that, you can have a 1 or 2 sentence thing, and I'm
Mhm.
okay with that. But if the intent is to do something else, I don't
Right.
know what that is. So
Right.
that's my
Yeah.
question on that policy. I'm okay with having it in there if that's the intent, is that you don't have
We
a
don't-
supervisory role, because that's pretty common across
Yeah.
most businesses has something like
Most.
that.
Yeah.
So I'd go to intent on that as well as all the stuff we're putting in the 400s. I think we need to be pretty clear what the intent is.
Okay.
So maybe before you spend a lot of time on that, let me get some feedback from Brady, and maybe I go to Jacobson on the SEIU stuff, just because I think sometimes he needs a little bit more direct feedback from him. So let me go to the two of them and get some feedback first, and I'll get that
Okay.
to you as soon as I get an answer from them.
Sounds good.
And I would guess that Jim for sure will have experience with this, because I know lots of the groups that he works with have the IASB policy manual, so he's gonna have kind of that broader multi-district perspective on it, which will be good. Brady may have to talk to Jane Ellarding at ISEA to get some feedback from her on it. But again, because so many districts have this, I would imagine that ISEA already has a take on this that they can share with ICEA, which then they can share with us.
Sounds good.
All right? Thanks, guys.
Next PNG meeting, the 7th of May.
That sounds right.
Does it matter what time? 4, 4:30?
Let me see.
Paul's got thoughts.
I don't know. He may
He wants you to think that he has
looking at his calendar, maybe.
I'd request 4. Got a soccer game that night.
Can we do 4?
Yeah.
Okay,
Let's
May
make
7th
May
at 4
7th.
o'clock.
And agenda
Kim?
items, the
Huh?
same series for,
Agenda
items?
Yeah.
okay?
Oh, 1, 2s,
Well,
and
Ones, twos, and nines, no, but threes and fours?
well, they'll probably be on there because we have to go to the board. And if
Right.
any changes,
Yeah.
they'll,
So everything
Okay, yeah.
will still need to stay on there.
Yeah, we can
Okay.
zip through just like we did today. If we
Yep.
get
Sure.
a handful.
Yeah, if there's nothing,
And
yep.
spend the majority of the time on 4s because by then Steve would have had feedback.
and review 3s with the changes that we
Yep.
Yes,
made, the numbers filled in. And all
Oops.
that.
absolutely.
Sounds good.
All right, nothing else? Is there a motion
What
to
are the
adjourn?
5s and 6s cover?
Fives
Five.
are,
5s and 6s are business office, right?
No.
7s and
No.
8s are business office and facilities.
5 and
5s
6 is
oh,
students
5s
and
and 6s
education,
is,
isn't it?
that's curriculum instruction stuff.
Yeah, and student.
Yeah. 5 and 6 is Amy and Matt. 7 and 8 is Craig. I'm just looking, I think about them in terms of who I have reviewing what. 5s and 6s, we're probably gonna wanna have Amy and Matt here for those.
Mhm.
Those are the 2 thickest segments that we have to go through.
So will 7 and 8s be gone through before we release?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, they will.
We're gonna do those before the 5s
Yes.
and 6s?
Absolutely. Yeah. 5s and 6s, there's a lot of meat to it, and a lot of it is really long.
Mhm.
Is that long? Yeah, a lot of those are really long. But you'll want to have Amy and Matt here, and
Yeah.
maybe even Diane Schumacher here for some of that 5 and 6 discussion.
Okay.
So,
As long as we can get 7s and 8s.
yep,
All the way
Okay.
done before.
Yep.
we're-
Yep.
Yeah. Because that's June, right?
yeah,
June 30th, yep. Mhm.
yeah,
Do
we're
we-
good,
Okay.
we're good.
'cause
Well,
that's
we
only
want to have the
one-
discussion with him.
Right,
Yeah, we'd have to have it
he's,
at the next subsequent
Yep.
meeting. I mean, and then edits are gonna have to probably happen.
Really quickly.
yeah.
Oh, well.
So-
But I think
outside
we'll
of
be
it,
able to
but-
do that.
Are you sure? Should we add him to May?
Well,
You always could, there's no reason not to.
if you think he can have them done, or he's close to having those done, or they could take precedent over
The 4s.
4s.
Yep,
Yeah,
because
so
we're losing that knowledge.
sure.
we may not, so, but do I,
Let's
let's
put
check
them on.
and then I can work with Kim and Steve to
Mhm.
finalize the agenda and let you guys know.
Yeah.
Sounds great.
All right. Is there a motion to adjourn? Thank you, Sean.
So moved.
All right. Paul,
Second.
motion is adjourned. Turn off the recording. 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 Turn off the